Welcome to hempTALKS, everyone. I'm Trish Thomas. I'm the CEO of Team, a marketing agency in Colorado, and we have a lot of clients in the hemp industry. I'm very happy to host the panel. As an introduction to hempTALKS, this is actually a platform that's sponsored by High Grade Hemp Seed. And the intention is to help offset the impact of some of the recent event cancellations and postponements that we've seen. So we're just intending to share education, expert advice, information, industry news, to just maintain connectivity and help us all thrive. So thank you so much for dialing in and supporting this inaugural panel that we're doing. Today, we're going to be talking about the past, present, and future of hemp. With the panelists that you see before you that I'm going to be introducing shortly, we're going to just explore hemp through the lens of its historical impact, the current marketplace demand, and of course the promising future that we all see for this industry. So before we dive in, I'd like to welcome our panelists. First is Kay Tamilo. Give us a wave, Kay.
Hello.
Kay is the research director of Brightfield Group. She leads a team at Brightfield that provides in-depth analysis on the CBD market, including reports on hemp and marijuana-derived CBD, which includes consumer research, new product developments, market sizes, and brand shares. Before joining Brightfield, Kay worked across various functions at a Fortune 50 food and beverage company. She's managed project teams, built analytic models and strategic frameworks to drive results in pricing strategy, assortment optimization, distribution logistics, global innovation, portfolio management, and annual revenue planning. You have been a busy lady, Kay. Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Very, very happy to have you. Courtney Barnes is next up. Courtney is an associate attorney at Vicente Cederberg, LLP, where she's focused on hemp law, policy, and regulatory compliance. In a constantly evolving legal landscape, clients look to Courtney to help them navigate the complex regulations governing the production, manufacture, and distribution of hemp and hemp products across the United States. Courtney has extensive experience drafting and helping to implement state and local cannabis regulatory regimes relating to various aspects of the industry. So welcome, Courtney.
Grateful to be here. Thanks, Trish.
And Mike Leago is next up. Mike is the founder of iHempX, the International Hemp Exchange, and he's also an advisor to High Grade Hemp Seed. Mike was one of the first licensed farmers to legally grow cannabis and hemp, and he's not only an industry thought leader, but also a domestically and internationally known expert on hemp genetics, farming best practices, supply chain management, and consumer goods. Throughout his career, Mike has worked diligently to support the hemp industry ethically and comprehensively. He's highly connected, solution-focused, and leverages a deep knowledge base and network. So thanks so much for coming, Mike.
Thank you, Trish.
Let's get started. One thing I wanted to let you know, there's the QA function at the bottom of all of your screens in Zoom. If you mouse down, a panel will appear and there's a QA feature down there. Share your questions at any point during the panel. I'm going to take a break for Q&A in the middle, and then we'll also have a block of time at the end to respond to questions. So queue up anything that strikes your fancy as we talk, and I will try to accommodate as many questions during those QA sessions as possible. Welcome to all of you. Let's start with the history of hemp. Humans have been cultivating hemp for thousands of years. Courtney, I know you have a lot of knowledge in this arena, so can you tell us briefly about the origin of hemp and kind of our history with this remarkable plant?
Sure. So from a regulatory standpoint, hemp has been cultivated globally for centuries. It's got thousands of documented uses ranging from animal feed, paper, fiber, food, personal care products, etc. From a US perspective, hemp was widely grown in the United States as an agricultural commodity from the colonial period into the late 1800s, early 1900s. The United States Department of Agriculture compiled statistics and published reports about its production and assisted farmers as they would with any other crop. Sort of starting with the Great Depression and really the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, misplaced anti-drug sentiment confusing hemp with marijuana and sort of this general cultural result of the economy downturn resulted in states starting to outlaw its production. The Marijuana Tax Act didn't explicitly or officially prohibit the production of hemp at the federal level, but by requiring a tax and a federal registration to cultivate and sell it, it resulted in a reduction of domestic hemp cultivation across the country. And really by the late 1950s, it essentially had practically decreased entirely. There was a little bit of a resurgence during World War II with the Hemp for Victory campaign, but by the time the Controlled Substances Act was passed in 1970, the federal government had officially prohibited domestic cultivation of hemp without a DEA registration. So we had this sort of promoted hemp cultivation across the country, then this state-by-state decrease in authorization up to almost essentially blanket prohibition at the federal level for hemp production. You needed a DEA permit and you couldn't sell the crop commercially if you were cultivating pursuant to that permit. So between 1970 and 2014, really, the only way Americans had access to products derived from cannabis and cannabis was through importation. And this is because the way that marijuana was defined in the Controlled Substances Act excluded certain parts of the plant. For example, sterilized seed, so non-viable seed and stalk. So that's sort of where we got this hemp lotions and this hemp seed oil products during this time was through importation, but there was no domestic production allowed for commercial purposes. Finally, in 2014, we had the passage of the 2014 Farm Bill, and this sort of created a state-by-state experiment for domestic production of hemp that we hadn't had for many, many years, that allowed state departments of agriculture and institutions of higher education to cultivate hemp for research purposes, notwithstanding the fact that hemp was still technically encompassed in the definition of marijuana, so long as certain requirements were met. So this sort of reinvigorated domestic hemp production, but because there were so little federal parameters, the state had to allow it, had to be for research purposes, had to be part of an agricultural pilot program or bona fide academic research. We have this vast state-by-state patchwork of what was authorized and prohibited. And finally, getting us to where we are today, we had the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill, which officially removed hemp, which is defined as all parts of the cannabis plant, including its extracts, derivatives, cannabinoids, with a THC, delta-9 THC concentration of 0.3% or less from the definition of marijuana under the CSA, and a federal framework for states to allow the commercial production of hemp in accordance with the USDA as sort of the overarching federal regulatory body, where hemp is once again treated as an agricultural commodity and is regulated like one in most but not all respects.
Right. So now you all see why Courtney's here. That was a beautiful summary of the last century. Kay, how have consumer sentiment and some shifting trends around the use of hemp helped drive readoption?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as Courtney mentioned, with the 2018 Farm Bill, where we saw really the separation of hemp and marijuana, so both part of the cannabis plant, but really now legally distinct, we saw CBD really start to take off in the marketplace in the US. So that was an important distinction for consumers, but also we've seen some other trends that are helping consumers to adopt CBD. So what we do at Brightfield Group is really study hemp-derived CBD. We also study the legal cannabis or marijuana industries. And so when we look at those things together, we do see that the kind of the shifting sentiment towards cannabis as a whole, so even marijuana states legalizing recreational use or medical use, has really also helped to for consumers to understand that hemp is, hemp and CBD, those are, have lots of value for the consumer, and they're something that they're more open to. Also, we're just seeing a lot of shifting consumer sentiment that's been ongoing for years now around health and wellness, holistic remedies, alternative treatments for, pharmaceuticals or over-the-counter products, and just a general sense of, looking for natural and functional ingredients. So there's been so much interest in CBD as derived from hemp, and it really plays into all of those different trends. And it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So that's, really, really driving the consumer interest and the growth of the hemp-derived CBD industry. We've also seen, with the 2018 Farm Bill, now this just, really incredible increase in hemp cultivation in the U.S., which is, seen as a great opportunity for a lot of farmers, whether they're, family farmers looking for a new opportunity, but also, with this, growing interest, particularly in CBD, the U.S. hemp cultivation industry really looking to meet that demand.
Yeah, thanks very much. So Mike, that kind of brings me to you. As one of the first licensed hemp farmers in the US, can you share a little bit about the experience of being one of the first people to grow hemp again after a very long hiatus?
Absolutely. And just to clarify, we were hardly the first, but we were certainly in the first wave of farmers here in Colorado that were trying to figure it out as hemp came back on the scene in 2014, 2015. And what was really interesting and continues to be is that, hemp left us in the 40s and 50s, how Courtney was describing earlier. And when it reemerged, it was a much different iteration of itself. What's really been driving the industry is the cannabinoid production right now, which was not really the focus, in prior industrial applications. We're seeing demand and, growing acreage and interest in true industrial applications and a bright future there. But this thing is just really taken off. Due mostly to CBD, but really that cannabinoid potential of the plant. So, a new industry emerged, in the ashes of what was once there. And it's been a super fragmented and disjointed industry that's, hit every bump in the road along the way and is trying to figure itself out, still to this day as to how it's going to kind of evolve and iterate. And work with the government to create true opportunities for farmers and businesses and allow some of these bigger supply chains to develop. But, I think that's, from my perspective on the history of the plan and what happened now that we're growing it again, it's fascinating that it's really this new iteration of hemp, and it's really more of the intersection of industrial hemp and the other side of the cannabis plant, marijuana, and exploring some of these unknown and known benefits on the medicinal side and non-intoxicating side. So there's a lot to know and a lot to learn about the plant, but the whole industry has been trying to figure out the best methods to communicate. And I think that's one of the things that we learned along the way and learned quickly is that there was not a lot of access to information and shared community and networks and really best practices. And some of those things I would still say hold true today, but we're certainly a much larger industry and established industry than 2015 and 2016 when I started getting involved. But we're at that point still trying to understand the landscape of the industry and who the consumers were and who the producers were and what the best practices were in the field and with genetics and where genetics were going. There were very, very limited options back then if you were trying to grow for CBD production. And so it's been really interesting to see how that whole side of the industry has emerged out of this as well. So I'd say, if I could summarize, it was a bit of a steep learning curve, and it was fun if you had the ability to roll some punches. But there's been, a lot of people that have had to learn the lessons the hard way and pay a lot to learn the lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think what you were speaking to is validation for hempTALKS, that ability to connect and share information in a broader way than just talking to the farmer or down the street or something like that is really important. I have a question for all of the panelists. Hemp, and particularly CBD, as we've been referencing, has just caught on like wildfire with consumers. How is consumer demand driving the whole hemp supply chain? Like Mike, how is it influencing genetics? Courtney, how is it influencing regulation? And Kay, what do you see coming in the next season or two for that CBD and consumer-driven demand? Any one of you can speak up first.
So with respect to compliance and regulatory, I think we're seeing this drive towards a desire for more natural products away from pharmaceutical products. And as Kay mentioned, the more comfortable and familiar people are with cannabis and its constituents is increasing a drive for that, because anecdotally, as well as what we're seeing from scientific research, is that it really does have therapeutic and beneficial properties and works. And so that kind of has two sort of regulatory results, which is one, we're seeing states be proactive about regulating particularly CBD, but cannabinoid containing hemp derived ingestible and consumer products, because in this lack of sort of clarity from the FDA or clear regulatory compliant pathway forward for a lot of these products. And then we're also seeing this kind of interplay of the three lanes of types of goods for the drug lane and what you can kind of say about pharmaceutical products and their efficacy, and then the supplement and natural products consumer lane and that efficacy, as well as cosmetics and all the different uses. And cannabis is one of those plants that really crosses all three of them. Yeah. And I think we'll see that impact regulations, and that the FDA and state agencies are having to grapple with this very versatile plant that can be, inhaled, ingested, applied topically, that we haven't really seen before, and that we now have broad access to, but not clear pathways forward for each product type yet.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I'll jump in. I feel like our what we feel from the consumer demand side is typically related to us via farmers that we're dealing with, in that farmers are looking for genetics that are going to be compliant, so that they have a crop that they feel comfortable with hitting the supply chain and for their consumers downstream, and that's what consumers want as well. We're hearing more about organic certifications. And good farming practices that consumers downstream can lean on from the farmers. But that's typically more how we feel it on the genetic side, is what the farmers' needs are as a result of the market.
Right.
Yeah, and I was actually going to echo what Mike said about organic certification. So with more and more consumers coming into the marketplace, more mainstream consumers, we're seeing more demand for things like organic certification. And then as manufacturers and brands are looking to get into more mainstream retailers, they're making sure that they have their CGMP certification. So really the leaders in this space, to meet the demand, to get the right distribution networks, are looking to, while there is still some kind of regulatory confusion, still looking to sort of get ahead of the game and play by the rules before they're set, and make sure they have a lot of transparency to the consumer, transparency into their supply chain, because consumers want to know what it is that they're putting on their skin or ingesting. So those things are becoming more and more important. We're also seeing just with so much innovation, we're seeing also innovation in the processing and extraction of hemp, and companies touting their own maybe proprietary methods as something that the consumers would be interested in. Bioavailability, people talking about nanotechnology. So, companies along the supply chain are looking for different advantages and to, kind of provide something new and effective to the consumers as that base grows.
And one more thing to add on there is that, a lot of it is consumer driven, but you also have to talk about the brands that are on the other side of those processors, where some of these things are going to be mandatory. Not all consumers look for these things on their labels, but most brands are going to require some, if not all of those certifications and supply chain regulations and, confidence. So that's a big piece of this equation, and honestly, one of the missing pieces right now until the FDA opens things up, but what those brands need in order to feed the consumer demand.
Right. I guess on that subject of consumer demand, Kay, from your research, how do you see the CBD customer changing? Who is the audience? How are the use patterns shifting?
Yeah, so we are surveying CBD consumers across the US. We've been doing it for about 1.5 years now. So we have, a sample of over 35,000 CBD consumers, and we are seeing some shifts, but we saw at the end of 2019 that about 15% of the US consumers have tried CBD, and that number is growing. So it's a lot of people coming into the market. We found that the consumer is slightly more likely to be female. Certainly trends towards like kind of a millennial age group, middle class or higher, so with some disposable income to spend, and they are regular users using 2 or more times per week. So they are out there to buy products, to use them regularly, to go back and purchase. So that's kind of the baseline of who the consumer is today. Some of the important things that we've seen kind of change over time is kind of where consumers are getting those products and what products they're using. So we saw CBD kind of start to grow up in the sort of vape and smoke shop space, so a very marijuana adjacent space. So a lot of those, consumers who were familiar with cannabis, more familiar with CBD, but now it's definitely driving towards a more, like I said before, more mainstream consumer. So you see it all over now, right? All different media, and we're seeing it drive into those different retail channels. So we know now it's, people who are shopping at CVS and Walgreens are looking for CBD, but also, people who are shopping online continues to be big, CBD specialty stores. So we're seeing a broadening of the distribution channels and really more mainstream consumers. And also we're seeing, tinctures, so the, oil or drops, were kind of the mainstay of the CBD market, and they're still the leading category, but we're seeing that shift as, again, we're getting people who are looking for lotion for pain relief. They're looking for familiar products. So a tincture, before I started researching CBD, I could not have told you what that was, and a lot of consumers don't know what that is, or how you use it. What does that mean? What is it good for? So things like capsules and drinks and lotions and cosmetics. People are really, starting to turn towards those as a familiar and easy to use product. And we're seeing definitely some consumer segments or personas emerge. So we call them, stressed out millennials. So we've got that millennial group looking to relax and relieve their stress. We've got the aging ailers. So we're having like the older, the kind of the boomer group come in, and they're using topicals for their, aches and pains. And then kind of that we call them the daily symptom attacker. That has been a pretty good constant segment for CBD, and will continue to be people who are really looking for that alternative to maybe a traditional medication. Nothing's worked for them, but they are using it on a daily basis to really tackle their kind of some of their medical needs.
It really is interesting to see the adoption go so broad and deep with a lot of different types of consumers. I'm getting some good questions, and while we're on the topic of CBD, from Greg and Christy around CBG. Do we feel that the market is ready for CBG? Do we think that it's really going to be utilized in products soon? What are your perspectives on the CBG topic?
I think there's a growing interest in the minor cannabinoids and all of the other constituents of cannabis that we are just sort of scratching the surface on. There's definitely a lot of research we still need on it, but there's huge potential. It's really going to be a matter of whether the research demonstrates that it can be used for the types of products that we have easy access to, or whether it'll be more of a pharmaceutical, antimicrobial, antiviral, whatever the research concludes. So I think we're going to see a huge increase in consumer interest in the other cannabinoid constituents. And also, I think we have so much to learn with respect to how not just cannabinoids, but the terpenes and flavonoids and all of the other components of the cannabis plant work together, both externally and then also on our own unique endocannabinoid system. So whether we're market ready, I'm not sure, but we're definitely going to, it's only going to be a growing interest for sure.
What do you think, Kay? Are you starting to do any research on CBG yet?
Yeah, we are watching as some companies are launching CBG products. There's also a few CBN products that are coming out, and a lot of these are coming from existing CBD players. On the consumer side, consumer awareness of the minor cannabinoids is still pretty low. It's interesting that even CBD consumers don't always understand CBD itself. They're still confused about what exactly it does, how they should use it, what their dosage should be, what brands are out there, where they can get it. So there's definitely a lot of consumer education work to be done on CBD, and then also for the minor cannabinoids. But we've seen so much interest from the industry in general around CBG and minor cannabinoids, and I think it's kind of only a matter of time before we see more of that coming into the market.
Mike, I mean, you're on the genetics and the farming side. How do you feel like the supply chain shifting around CBG? Is there going to be availability, and is that starting to ramp up?
Yes, we're seeing a lot of pull from the market for CBG genetics. Until the last few months, we've really been in a position where the industry and the world has really never had an abundance of CBG available. So the fact that consumer awareness and market-driven data is low is no surprise, because we're at the infancy of CBG. We're really excited about it, given that the minor cannabinoids show a lot of potential, but CBG is really unique in a lot of ways, but mostly in the fact that it's that mother cannabinoid, and it's really the precursor to all the other activity that happens with minor cannabinoids and major cannabinoids. And for that reason, it just seems like the plant is giving that piece of it a lot of respect and a large critical role in the plant. And I couldn't think of a better place to hold a lot of that plant magic. So we're already seeing the research come back that it's a pretty diverse potential offering from what it can do, CBG. A lot of that list looks kind of similar to CBD, and then a lot of it is pretty unique. So research is yet to come, but we're just now at that point that we really have an abundance of product and material to start researching and testing with and creating products.
That's great. One more question on the CBG topic before we shift. And Mike, you're probably the one best equipped to answer this, but do you know what ratios are really available in CBG-rich hemp cultivars? Is there kind of a range that farmers can expect, or is that not really known yet?
So I would say, I don't know that number off the top of my head. Doing some quick math, I think if you're talking CBG to THC, you're going to see something like 60 or 70 to 1. Okay. With some of these new varieties on the market. So seeing, 14, 15, 16% CBG, still right at that kind of 0.2% THC. And that's another reason why I think the industry is excited and farmers are interested to play with the plant, is it just really stays low in THC. And so you can really pump up those CBG numbers. CBD is typically pretty low as well, 1%, maybe 2%. So that's much less of a ratio, but CBG to THC is pretty impressive in the plants.
Okay, very helpful. I'm getting some great questions from our audience. Thank you all for weighing in. One question is around lobbying and policy and special interest. To kind of sum it up, do any of you have any bead on special interest groups that are influencing the hemp industry, or the level of lobbying or investment in policy making that's going on from any of the major players? If that's out of your purview, that's absolutely fine.
I think some of the bigger ones, primarily at the federal level, we have, the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, we have the National Cannabis Industry Association, there's the Cannabis Trade Federation, and some of these have cannabis and hemp overlap, but those are sort of the three big ones that I think we're seeing really at the table right now. But also with respect to hemp, you have, the policy work that the APA and the American Herbal Products Association and some of those sort of non-cannabis specific groups, but that have a long history of influencing and shaping laws at the federal level, also really take a vested interest in ensuring that the cannabis and hemp industry is protected and regulated responsibly going forward.
Very helpful. This question kind of harkens back to the organic topic you were talking about earlier, Kay. Do we think organic is going to have more longevity over non-certified organic products? Any research to back up a bent toward organic or not caring as much about that cert?
Right. It's tough to say at this point. We are seeing consumers come back to us and say, yeah, organic is important to me. And I think we do see that CBD, aside from, I talked about smoke and vape shops, it also has a very, strong foothold in the natural product space. And so those consumers do tend to care more about those types of certifications. They're looking for organic certifications. And we've also seen, even in the food and beverage industry where organic is becoming big, and even mainstream consumers, right, are looking for organic certification. So I don't think it's going to be, I would say something that you have to have, but it can be a differentiator for players, for certain consumers.
And along those same lines with the CGMP certification, is it kind of ahead of the game to seek that cert now, or does it feel like it's timely?
No, it is a baseline requirement that if you're creating a food product or a dietary supplement or seeking to distribute internationally or receive, kind of large scale investments, this is, while we are waiting on the FDA to kind of come out with cannabis specific authorizations and regulations, CGMP and applies as like a baseline foundational requirement that won't go away.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's see.
Trish, I'm just going to chime in real quick on that organic note too, that, as a farmer, it opens a lot more doors to have organic certified product. If you're, working on organic land already, you're certainly going to have a unique set of customers compared to a traditional farmer right now in the hemp industry, as there's not an abundance of organic material out there.
Okay, that's helpful to know. One more question on CBG before we truly bounce off that topic. Will CBD co-crystallize with CBG?
Ooh,
Does anybody have an answer to that?
Doctor on the call right now. I'm not an extraction expert, so I can't help you with that one, Stephen.
Okay. Some of our audience members are going deep. Do any of you have kind of a perspective on what's going on overseas? We've been talking a lot about the US market, US regulations, the environment with consumers here, but there is a larger worldwide boom happening with hemp. How can US companies best participate beyond our borders? Any brilliant ideas from any of you?
Ensuring compliance at the federal and state level, making sure you have all of your certifications, you are CGMP certified is a pretty universal standard, whether you're going to distribute in the EU or in other countries. There are different requirements that apply to marketing a product internationally, but those sort of safety substantiation data, ingredient formulation, allergens, those FDA basic, they're not basic in that they're definitely time intensive and costly to perform, but those baseline requirements that apply for national distribution of ingestible products and consumer products are going to be critical for exportation, because while there's certain labeling exceptions that may apply to export only goods, those requirements for safety and ingredient and formulation and consistency are going to be pretty universal. So the more you can, whether it's organic certified or those kind of nationally recognized certifications and sort of federal authorization is going to put you at an advantage. And then additionally, sort of tracking what's going on in these other countries and having the opportunity to be a first mover is also valuable as well. There's a lot of countries that are in the process of considering the best way to regulate or creating these new programs. So we are behind in a lot of sense with respect to cultivation, but as far as cannabis regulation generally, there's still a lot of opportunity internationally to kind of get involved and start building your network.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one before I put a twist on it?
I definitely wanted to let the attorney chime in first, so thanks.
Good call, Mike.
But no, there's absolutely a lot of opportunity internationally right now at all, for a lot of different aspects of the supply chain. I think America right now is looked at as the leader when it comes to high cannabinoid production and extraction, from genetics to farming know-how, harvesting, drying, extraction. We certainly are on the forefront right now, and a lot of countries are looking to us again as experts in the field. So there's an opportunity now, if the government gives us the window to do so, to continue to be that leader out there and develop and give farmers a chance to grow this industry quickly and take advantage of that first mover advantage when it comes to high cannabinoid production and quality products.
And on that topic, we have another question from Will. How can we keep international isolate and crude coming into the U.S. from completely disrupting our homegrown market? How should we best address imports? Any thoughts?
I'd say that's a mix of legal and regulatory, and then marketing and branding, and getting consumers to feel proud of buying American and American grown product, and making sure that we're not opening the door for another country to flood our market and wipe out American farmers. So I'm all for as much of a level playing field as possible. But if we want to give the hemp industry a chance to grow and establish itself, we got to give farmers and companies involved a chance to succeed long term.
Absolutely. Let's kind of shift focus to, one more good question came in from Drew. With the challenges recently created from COVID-19, can hemp provide kind of a modern hemp for victory opportunity, agriculturally, economically, in terms of global trade? I guess in light of our current reality, all of us having to socially distance from each other, which is why we're hosting this panel remotely right now. What opportunity do you see for hemp to kind of play a role?
I'll jump in again, or go ahead, Courtney.
No, please.
Okay. I was just going to say, I think that this is a time for the, at least domestically, the American supply chain to shine, and for American farmers, American workforce to, reestablish themselves. And it shows the importance of, having our own domestic supply across the board, and not relying, entirely on foreign trade to meet our bare necessities. So I think this is an opportunity for farmers to kind of lean on what's happening right now, and another crop and another opportunity, and another way to, create more jobs, create more revenue, and revitalize an economy that's taken a hit one way or another.
Go ahead.
No, I definitely agree. I think this is a time for unification, and when we all are kind of forced to slow down, to really get educated, to work together, to help support each other, because we all have something to provide as an industry, and there's not a better time to really get to know and form relationships and demonstrate that we can be leaders in both quality, consistency, and outlook than there is right now, than sort of this time of crisis.
And I did want to add that, we've looked at, where some of the major CBD, US CBD brands are sourcing their hemp. And, most of them are sourcing from the US, and it is a point of pride for them. So definitely, echoing what Mike said, as a moment to really let the US industry and the supply chain shine. And also just, as people are dealing with stress and anxiety, it's a moment for, CBD brands to really, kind of step in and kind of help with that. We're asking consumers what they think, and we see that people are talking about, I'm still going to be using CBD, maybe a little more now these days. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Could not agree more. So, I think we all agree. I'm going to shift to future focus a little bit. And for those of you joining us as audience members, just know that I'm going to get to as many of your questions as I possibly can, but we have quite a few, so we will do our best to respond to as many as possible. But hemp is a juggernaut, as we've all been talking about. The global hemp market is projected to hit $26.6 billion by 2025. Kay, I'd love to hear your take on what you think people's long-term appetite is for hemp-derived products and how you maybe anticipate some of their preferences and buying patterns changing over the coming decade.
Absolutely. I do think that hemp, CBD, the minor cannabinoids are here to stay. We get a lot of questions on, is this just a fad? And I don't think so. Consumers are responding so positively to these products. Their word of mouth is still the #1 way that people hear about hemp-derived CBD products. Marketing is just really starting to ramp up, but people are, sharing their stories with their friends and neighbors, saying, "This has really worked for me. These are great products. You should go get them." And so there's a lot more potential for this industry to grow. I think we will see, as I mentioned before, more and more what I have been calling mainstream consumers come into the market, and that's going to drive even more product innovation around these CPG adjacent categories. So not just tinctures and vapes, or although hemp pre-rolls are still a growing thing, people are certainly interested in that. But the lotions and we will see some kind of fad-like products out there, but we're still in such a early phases in learning what all the benefits of these products are, that we're just going to see a ton of innovation and more competition in the market, which will certainly benefit consumers. And I also think over the next decade, we've been waiting for regulation, and that will benefit the consumer as well. And I do think we will see that fairly soon, as it's something that consumers are really pushing for. We're not going to go back in time and change that. And so I think we will see the industry really kind of grow up and come out of that the Wild West atmosphere. And so that will, drive even more adoption. I think we'll see larger companies, maybe some of the big CPG players coming into the market. But again, just, more consumers, more distribution channels, more innovation, and more, when we talked about CBG, I think we're going to see more from the hemp plant besides, beyond CBD.
Absolutely. So on that subject, Mike, that poses the question of how do farmers diversify? How do they ensure high quality production? How do they balance maybe some of the different utilizations of the hemp plant, whether it's CBD production or food or fiber? Do you have any thoughts on kind of the diversification play that makes sense?
Sure. I think a lot of farmers these days are looking for as many assurances as they can in the marketplace and in a growing, emerging industry that's not always easy to come by. But that doesn't mean that there's not opportunity out there for farmers, but we're seeing more caution in the marketplace than just overly kind of bullish behavior on if you grow it, they will come. So we're seeing farmers that, diversify. Now that we have more cannabinoid options, we're seeing a lot of farmers hedge their bets with CBG. We're seeing more farmers hedge their bets with varieties that finish at different times, because not only is just finding your customer one challenge in the supply chain, but delivering the quality and the consistency they're looking for is another issue. So we're seeing farmers now going that extra step in figuring out how to create consistent production from their fields, and so they're seeing more consistent CBD and THC levels. They're seeing more consistent harvesting and drying methodology, so that you have a product that's consistent for extractors to put into their units. And so we're seeing folks, add auto flowering varieties, adding early finishing, adding different varieties to kind of stagger their harvest. In my mind, that's another form of diversifying your crop and, hedging your bets not only on your own internal capabilities, but also just extending your harvest season, your drying season, the capabilities of your team and your equipment. And so really kind of playing into that efficiency, because, a lot of farmers are having issues and a lot of farmers are not having issues. And I think one key differentiator that we see is, the efficiencies of what's happening in the field and what it's costing folks to produce this crop, because it's a really wide range and a big spectrum of what people are putting into this crop. And there's also a pretty big range downstream as to what people are getting out of the crop. And I think there's a direct correlation, or I'm sorry, not a direct correlation, because, sometimes the guys that are putting, very little into their crop are getting just as much or more than the guys that are putting, too much into their fields and operations.
Yeah, I know that that's a very interesting minefield to navigate for farmers, but appreciate your perspective on that.
Yeah.
I'm getting quite a few questions, and I'm going to try to kind of aggregate them into a question for all of you around some of the uses of hemp outside of CBD and CBG and kind of wellness and personal care products. Thinking about textiles and some of the historical uses for hemp and cannabis that are coming back. Kay, do you see any research around areas that are potentially hotspots where there are some other industrial uses for hemp that maybe we're not talking about today? And is there space to grow demand, outside of maybe international products or some of these sectors we've been talking about, textiles and things like that? What do you think?
Yeah, we don't do research directly on that, but what we are seeing is just an interest in hemp and that sort of natural and environmentally friendly product in general. And also along with kind of the CBD side, we're seeing more interest, more products with like hemp seed oil, kind of riding that wave. And also just in general, we've seen that as consumers are becoming familiar with CBD and that it comes from hemp, then when they see, oh, this textile, is a hemp textile, it means a little bit more to them. So there is, a little, pick up an interest for those types of products. And again, it kind of just, it also really goes back to kind of a turning for looking for natural products, whether that's ingredients in your food and supplements or your textiles. And also thinking more about kind of industrial applications and how we can approach kind of climate change. So I think there's certainly a lot of opportunity on the industrial side for, taking advantage of hemp, particularly as we're seeing this, great increase in cultivation.
Right. Any other thoughts on that, Mike and Courtney?
I think the product of where we are right now, there is a huge interest and movement and passion, especially with younger folks, towards sustainability. And while we are not in a place yet to make these investments in where it's not totally like economically more competitive than what we're using in the traditional senses, for example, cotton and other building materials and industrial uses, as soon as we have the manufacturing infrastructure and the investment in kind of streamlining these processes, and the technology which people are working on, and the United States has a huge opportunity to really capitalize on, we will get there, because hemp is just so much more sustainable, it's more recyclable than all of these traditional materials, and it also has kind of this domestic economy and profitability opportunity for America to really capitalize and build on the potential here. So I think it's huge, and we really should be investing more time and resources into making this sort of a domestic opportunity for us as an industry.
On that subject, we had a question about fiber processing that's kind of tied to what you were just saying, Courtney. Do you feel that there's an opportunity for us to compete with China as we kind of ramp up some of those alternate use cases for hemp in the US supply chain?
I'm not a market expert, but yes, absolutely. It's going to be all on price of production and capacity. So your ability to process the same amount of hemp at the same size at the same price, I don't think we're there yet. But as we've kind of touched on throughout this conversation, there's value for American consumers to buy American-made goods that are processed by local businesses that we're helping to support each other. And now more than ever should we be operating as a community. So of course, why limit yourself? I think there's absolutely an opportunity to make an impact domestically, whether that'll be simple or short term, maybe not, but definitely don't not do it because it's cheaper in China right now.
Right. Yeah.
I'll add a little bit to that. I agree with what Courtney said, and if the question is, are we going to beat China in the fiber game? No, we probably won't. But can we compete and create a domestic market for fiber? Absolutely. And I think that ties back to one of the points I made right at the very beginning, which is Canada or hemp emerged back on the market in a much different form than it left. And I think cannabinoids are giving us a unique opportunity to build the infrastructure for the rest of the industry to kind of follow. And I don't, that might be the wrong way to phrase it, because there's been, countless hours and years and work and advocacy that's gone into getting us to this point. But cannabinoids really have the potential and are driving a ton of money into the hemp industry and into private business and allowing people to diversify and invest. And I'm hoping that that's what we see out of the hemp industry is a lot of these companies that are making money continue to reinvest in other aspects of the plant and other aspects that we can be competitive as a nation for different aspects of the supply chain, whether it's farmers, processors, brands, and then ultimately getting it into the hands of the consumer.
Absolutely.
And
Go
just
ahead.
to mention that, especially with this new THC threshold in the state mandated, or excuse me, federally mandated, sort of flexible but really standardized regime, and as Mike touched on, with a lack of success in history for certified seeds, at least across the nation, where industrial uses may be a really good short-term opportunity too, if we can create the infrastructure to process and use them, because you're not having as much of that risk with the THC threshold if you're producing it for fiber. And as a beginner farmer, it's all about as finding buyers and being able to profit and make money off of your crop. But I do think there's an opportunity here too, while the USDA and I guess DEA figures out how to ensure that we're not crushing the economy by our testing mechanisms.
Absolutely. On that topic, I have a couple questions around the different varietals of hemp that are focused on some of these industrial applications like building materials or textiles. Any comment on just the variability of hemp strains, and if there are different varietals that are kind of targeted for some of these different use cases?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump into that. I think we're still very early on in understanding how these new varieties are going to adapt, especially when you consider some of these states have not been growing hemp. So, it's been, nearly impossible to say how every variety is going to grow in Texas prior to growing them in Texas. So there's a degree of that happening in the industry right now, but it's quickly evolving, and it's always interesting to get a peek behind the curtain, if you will, because a lot of what's happening with hemp in development is somewhat unique. There's aspects of how the cannabis industry has grown to do things that are carrying into the hemp industry that aren't necessarily found in common agricultural crops. So just the processes of going through certifications and validating these crops has been a little bit different and set a unique set of circumstances for the agencies involved in all these different states. And that, I think, is the other element, is that a lot of this has been happening at local level. So states have been trying to figure it out on their own without federal guidance and without necessarily having their rules totally aligned with the state next to them. But now we have a crop that's, crossing state lines. So there's been, no shortages of uniqueness to the crop, and that goes all the way down to figuring out which varieties are going to grow really well in any particular environment. And touching on the last point that Courtney made about industrial varieties and their THC thresholds, to some degree that's true, but to another, you get those industrial varieties out of their certified regions, and stress and environmental factors can cause them to behave wonky as well. And with the new potential USDA rules that they're throwing at us for testing, even industrial crops have the potential to test hot with some of these new states and some of these new testing requirements. So the whole thing's a little bit up in the air right now, but I think on the ground, local and state-wise, people are trying to work together to make it work. Sometimes there's a little disconnect in how the rules are being talked about or displayed on a federal level, but when it comes down to the agencies involved and the people involved in trying to make this work at a state level, there seem to be a lot of folks involved that want to make it work rather than wanting to poke holes or see people fail.
Absolutely. I may run 5 minutes over so we can get some closing thoughts, and thank you all for the wonderful questions. I really do wish we could get to all of them. Courtney, any final comments on the regulatory landscape and maybe what you see changing and adapting in the next few years?
Absolutely. So I think Mike led into that perfectly in that we have created the system for THC testing and this new federally authorized framework for hemp production of what was, less than 5 years ago, a Schedule I controlled substance. So of course, in the USDA's implementing regulations, we have what the industry and many reasonably considered to be extreme overregulation in certain areas. So to combat sort of this 0.1% threshold where you have a viable agricultural crop that you can sell and make money off of versus a Schedule I controlled substance that you must destroy and lose your entire season, we've actually seen the industry respond, and it shows how we as an industry can impact the future and have an opportunity here to create better regulations where originally the USDA's final rule required that all cannabis hemp testing be conducted by DEA registered laboratories and that all disposal be conducted by DEA registered parties. And as a result of that pushback, because there were only 44 labs in the country that qualify, they've decided to not enforce that requirement for at least this planting season and are taking the opportunity to receive more information, because just for the same reasons like Mike stated, what is compliant and successful in Oregon may not be at all compliant or viable in Texas or another state. And without having that history of production, we are putting the livelihood of farmers on the line here to kind of experiment with this arbitrary number that differentiates an agricultural crop between a controlled substance. So I do think we have a ton of education that needs to be conducted, but there's not a better time and place for us to make real impact as a group and sort of, make sure that we're all working together to educate each other on these things and have a unified voice to ensure that the American economy and domestic hemp industry will thrive.
Absolutely. On that subject, during any boom time, we see some unscrupulous players come into the marketplace with exaggerated or false or even just untested claims. Mike, on the genetics front, do you see some ground being gained in terms of, the marketplace kind of leveling out and us beginning to have some transparency?
Yes and no. There in some aspects it starts to level out in a little bit, and then a new opportunity arises or a new channel opens up that people jump on, and the same set of bad actors and the same bag of tricks come out again. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about seeds these days. It feels like isolate was 12, 18 months ago, with people jumping in and weird deals going on, and folks that don't seem to have much association to the industry, trying to capitalize on somebody else. And, sometimes those deals work out just fine, and other times folks lose. Right now, when it's happening in seeds, it's farmers, and farmers have to lose slowly, it seems, and they often don't find out until later in the season that the genetics they bought or the contract they signed isn't worth what they thought it was, and that they just put a lot of time, energy, and resources into something that's no longer viable. And so that's really disheartening to see, and something we're certainly trying to educate farmers on and give them more resources to know what to look for and what to look out for.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's a very important point. I guess in closing, I would love to hear from each of you. And Kay, let's start with you. What's your one key prediction for the future of the hemp industry, if you could look into your crystal ball?
Yeah, I think I kind of said it a little bit before, but definitely it's here to stay, and we'll see more cannabinoids coming into the market. But I also think it's important that we will see more consumer education. We're going to see brands trying to figure out how they can really reach consumers, educate them on the right products, how to use the products, and marketing is going to become much more important. I talked about word of mouth before, but we're going to see some more sophisticated marketing strategies come in, and brands are going to really start to target their consumers very specifically. So you can't be everything to everyone, and so I think we're going to see a lot more people looking into, okay, who are my consumers, how can I best talk to them, meet their needs, provide them with an effective quality product, and that they know is safe. So we're going to see a lot more of that.
Nice to hear. Courtney, any crystal ball predictions?
Echoing on Kay, and sort of as we discussed earlier, I think we are just tapping the surface of the potential that cannabis has and its constituents, and our understanding of our own endocannabinoid system and the potential that the constituents of cannabis, either isolated and more likely together, have on our body, and the potential there. Now that we have this federally sanctioned mechanism for accessing high quality cannabis that we didn't have before, I think that the research is going to be world changing for sure.
Mike, you get the last word.
Sure. I'd say as far as the crystal ball these days, that it gets cloudier every day, it seems, over the last week and months. So hemp is here to stay. That's a point that we've made several times here. This industry is just getting started. CBD is far from the only thing for us to explore in this plant. Farmers have a lot to learn about best practices, as do the other supply chain folks downstream. And so I see a long future here. There's going to continue to be shakeout, and some of the heyday is a little bit behind us in terms of just planning it and hoping that somebody shows up with a pile of cash at the end of the season. But as any industry matures, the true players come to the table, and the riffraff eventually fall to the side, and trust and track records and brands and reputations will emerge and continue to grow, and companies will establish themselves as the right players, and farmers will connect with them, and supply chains will grow as they always have in agriculture. But hemp's going to be an interesting one with a lot of iterations and a lot of different facets that's going to give it a lot of potential when compared to traditional crops out there. So it's exciting times, and I think there's still a lot of good days and opportunity in front of us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you joining us on the panel. It was a great conversation. We could have talked for another few hours, but I appreciate all of you in the audience and the panelists as well spending your evening with hempTALKS. This was our inaugural hempTALKS event for those of you who've joined us since the beginning. It was triggered by the cancellation of South by Southwest, where we were planning to all be together at this very time in Austin. We are planning to host many more webinars and share a lot of great content on our new website that we're going to be launching on Thursday. So please visit us at hemptalks2020.com and use the hashtag hemptalks as well on social media. I know that we have a lot of questions that we weren't able to answer, but hopefully as we build this platform and this forum for hemp industry players to connect, you'll have opportunities to ask those questions and get answers from experts just like you saw here today. So everybody have a great evening and stay healthy out there. Thanks for joining us.